When the advocate comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth who comes from the Father, he will testify on my behalf. You also are to testify because you have been with me from the beginning. But I have said these things to you so that when the hour comes, you may remember that I told you about them. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you. But now I am going to him who sent me. Yet none of you ask me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your hearts. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. About sin, because they did not believe in me. About righteousness, because I am going to the Father, and you will see me no longer. About judgment, because the ruler of this world has been condemned. I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me, because he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. For this reason I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. Through these words our God is still speaking.
Thanks be to our still speaking God.
You may be seated. Now, the problem with continuing to work at better and better translations is that you lose jokes along the way. The old joke used to be, what kind of a car did the disciples drive? Well, they drove a Honda, of course, because while Linda, when she read it from the New Revised Standard Version, said that they were all in one place, it used to say they were all in one accord. Yeah, I know, it's the lowest form of humor. That's what I understand. No, that was enough. So we come to Pentecost. A very great festival for the church. It was a relatively minor festival for the Jewish people, coming 50 days after Passover, so most of the people who came to celebrate the great day of Passover, they had already returned home. There would have been a few pilgrims, but mostly it was people who were already there. The time when the Spirit of God becomes manifest and the church is equipped to go out. We have been reading through these days of Easter, time and time again, that the disciples were afraid. They were locked away. They were hiding. They were afraid of what might happen to them, having seen Jesus taken out and crucified. And now, with the Spirit coming upon them, they are out in the street, out where all the crowd is, proclaiming Jesus, the one who was crucified and yet is alive among us. Jesus had told them to wait for this time because it would be a time of power. It would be a time when they would begin to learn more and more about who he is and what God's plan is for us and what God's goal is for the world. He hadn't taught them everything. He told them, you can't understand it yet. You'll have to wait and be attentive and be listening. And it has never stopped. God, the Spirit, is still among us and is still teaching us. God is still speaking. Used to go to a conference where there was a Old Testament professor who would come and share with us, and I always enjoyed him. He always had such a unique way of looking at Scripture, and it helped to open it up in new ways. And I remember that at one of the times he said, well, you know, he teaches undergraduates as well as graduate students, and so when they come and they take their first Bible class from him, he tells them, of course, they have to have a Bible with them for their studies, so he says, take your Bible, now open up the back and rip the cover off. Well, most of them were shocked and dismayed about that, and many of them, like me, would not do it. You don't do that to books. Doesn't matter if it's Winnie the Pooh or the Bible. You don't rip up a book. But his point was, as he said that, God didn't stop speaking back then. God has always continued to be with the church and to talk to us and to lead us and to guide us. And we learn more and more and more about what God is about. Now, it's not that it's in contradiction to those things, but it helps us understand them. So that when Jesus says that the great commandment is to love God with our entire being, and the second one is like it, that is equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. On this hang all the law and the prophets. We are still learning what that means. We are still finding out what it means to love God with our entire being and how to love our neighbors. We are finding different ways to do that. We are finding different ways in which God is inviting us to do that. And I want us to think back on that passage that Linda read for us about that first Pentecost. I want us to notice what happened. The Spirit came upon the disciples, sound of rushing wind, fire on their heads, and it must have been quite a ruckus because the people gathered and the disciples came out into the street with them and began to proclaim Jesus. And though all of these people were from Galilee, probably not wealthy, not well educated, would have had a distinct accent. You could have picked it up without any problem. They spoke, and the people heard them in their own language. What is incredible to me is that God did not change everybody to speak the same language. That's not what happened. But they heard it in their own way. They heard it in their own language. What a wonderful lesson for us as the church. We don't have to go out and make people be like us. We have to learn to speak to them so that they understand it in their own language. So that people who are starving, our actions and our words talk about food. That as we come and help them have more to eat, so God comes and offers us real food that does more than just keep the body alive. It nourishes us within, in our very soul. For those who have been abused and pushed around, we come and offer them a safe place. And perhaps talk about the God who comes and shelters us under those great wings, or places us on the rock where we are safe. It is not about making people like us. It is about helping people connect to God where they are. The 11 did not start Galilean as a second language course. They spoke to those people where they were. And while that seems very miraculous, it is no less miraculous when God helps us reach out to others who are not like us, and yet we find ways to make connections. We find ways to talk to people in the language that they understand. You might talk to somebody and they're really interested in NASCAR. And they're talking about all these cars and all the power and stuff. Well, there's an invitation. These people understand power. They understand horsepower. Now we're going to talk to them about spirit power. And we may not get into that all at once. We may not do that the first time we meet them, but we begin to learn their language and we begin to find out how they're talking. And we begin then to talk about the good news of Jesus that way. This Pentecost time is the birth of the church, we say. It's when the church really became the church. What was different? They went out in mission and caring to the people out there and began to spread the good news about Jesus. That's the church. The church. Not trying to force them to be like us, but helping them hear the way they are the good news of Jesus Christ. This is a wonderful time of celebration for us. The Spirit comes and teaches us more and more about God and how God is working, and is there with us to help us also learn about those around us, to learn their language. Some from the church have gone into foreign mission fields and have had to literally learn a new language. Others are still speaking the same language, for most of us, English, but we're learning to speak it in different ways. there's a commercial. I love it. I remember commercials. I have no idea what they're about, but I remember the commercial. At least parts of it and stuff, where the guy comes and he's got a different car, and the kids are there talking about it, and his wife is translating what the teenagers are saying, you know. And many of us feel that way. We're not too sure what these words mean anymore. They use them in a whole different context than we did. But we learn that, and we learn to speak that. And so we find out how we can do that with the people we come in contact with. Maybe you're not in contact so much with 13-year-olds. Maybe you're still talking to people your own age, but they have a little different take on life. You still have to learn who they are and how to speak to them in ways that make sense. Back, it's been quite a few years ago, I still remember, though, being in evangelism committee meetings, and the person who was chairing it would always say, well, you know, we need to get out there and get these people so that their sins are forgiven. And my response was always the same. While that may be true, many of the people we're going to come in contact with don't even know there are rules, let alone that they broke them and need any forgiveness. That may not be the best place to start with people. Maybe what they know is that they're lonely. And so we need to offer community and fellowship and friendship and talk about the great love of God that embraces them. And as God embraces them, God will take care of them. And God will lead them through whatever it is they need. We just need to find the place where we can talk to them. And I don't know about you, but I've never found it real attractive when people came up and told me I was a sinner going to hell. It really didn't do very much for me to say, oh boy, can I go to church with you? I want to hear that a whole lot more. No, I want to hear about God's great love. And yeah, I've got stuff in my past that I was glad to drop eventually and to give up the guilt and the fear of all of that. But that wasn't the lead-in that took me where I needed to be. It's the love of God. It's the good news of Jesus Christ, who is here with us in the power of the Spirit to teach us, to love us, and to reach out to others through us. Amen.